It's 2020, and if you live in the United States, you know that means that the presidential elections have started. Since the primary started in Iowa a couple of days ago, I thought it would be helpful to give an overview of the positions that the current candidates are taking on issues in technology policy. This can range from things like the tech economy, to artificial intelligence and facial recognition systems, to automation, to internet access, and more. This is just an overview though, so if there's anything that I missed, definitely post it in the comment section so that we can all learn more about their positions. For example, Vox did a great interview that I pull from in this video where they asked a bunch of candidates 7 questions on technology issues that I definitely recommend checking out, and I'll have it linked in the description box. As a disclaimer, this is based on the Democratic candidates who are in the race as of February 6th and their stated opinions. And I'm not covering the Republican candidates, mostly because Donald Trump is the frontrunner by a huge margin. The other 2 candidates are currently polling at less than 2%. But if you'd like a video recap on the Trump administration and how it has dealt with AI, you can also let me know that in the comments. And timestamps for each candidate are in the pinned comment. Alright, let's get started in alphabetical order because it was the only fair way that I could think of. We'll start with Michael Bennet. Michael Bennet is a senator from Colorado who is currently polling at less than 1% nationally. And his stances on technology policy are somewhat sparse. According to his campaign website, Bennet supports election security reforms for both the United States and also internationally, and specifically supports the identification of areas of development for artificial intelligence programs to detect and disrupt foreign disinformation campaigns, including deepfakes. Outside of national security, I couldn't find a ton about Bennett's stances on technology policy as a candidate. However, as a senator, he co-sponsored a bill in January 2019 that would create an Office of Critical Technologies and Security at the White House, with the goal of combating national security threats posed by foreign powers, including those that relate to hacking or AI systems. In January of 2020, Bennet sent a letter to the U.S. Chief Technology Officer in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, criticizing the American AI Initiative, which is the Trump administration's plan to remain globally competitive in AI development, as being an insufficient approach. He noted a lack of consideration of issues of privacy, a lack of international collaboration, immigration reform policies that would prevent international talent from coming to the United States, and a lack of consideration of worker retraining and job security. Next up is Joe Biden, former vice president for the Obama administration and former senator of Delaware. Biden is currently polling at 27% nationally. When it comes to his presidential campaign, much of Biden's focus is on supporting the infrastructure needed to deploy electric vehicles across the United States and implementing national broadband so that rural areas can reliably connect to the internet. In the former case, he specifically wants to install 550,000 new charging stations across highways in the U.S. When it comes to the tech economy, Biden is not a fan of some of the big tech corporations. He supports the abolishment of Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act, which is going to be a recurring theme in this video. This legislation currently gives tech companies immunity from civil litigation due to content that users post on their platforms. And so abolishing it entirely would make them liable for the things that their users post. Now, the idea of either changing or abolishing Section 230 has been a hot topic of debate for the last several years, as there's been more and more push to rein in tech companies. However, legal experts have pushed back against abolishing Section 230 entirely, citing concerns around censorship, and pointing out that abolishing Section 230 doesn't necessarily solve the challenges that come with content moderation on these platforms. Biden doesn't seem to have a stance on artificial intelligence systems specifically. His campaign website touches on AI in the context of national security, remaining internationally competitive, and foreign policy, but does not delve into specifics. There have been reports that he's been talking to Andrew Yang about his concerns surrounding automation and AI, but neither he nor his campaign have made a public statement on this. Our third candidate is Mike Bloomberg. Former mayor of New York City and billionaire, Bloomberg is currently polling at 10.6% nationally. In terms of technology policy, Bloomberg has pledged to expand broadband access to 10 million more Americans by 2025 and to all Americans by 2030. He does not support breaking up large tech companies, as he doesn't seem to believe that there's a good reason to do so. And in 2016, he actually advocated for increased cooperation between tech companies and the government, citing the case of Apple refusing to create a backdoor into their phones when the FBI requested it after the San Bernardino shootings. It's unclear whether he still supports this. He is, however, in favor of reviewing Section 230 for potential changes to hold tech companies more liable for their content. He also plans to create more financial incentives for green infrastructure and green technology. In the past, he has brought up concerns about AI and automation taking jobs, but has not brought it up during his current campaign. Finally, he expressed concerns about the potential abuse of facial recognition systems by both the government and the police, and advocated for better security measures and community consent when these systems are implemented. Our fourth candidate is Pete Buttigieg. Former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Buttigieg is currently polling at 7% nationally. And in terms of technology policy, Buttigieg's stances are largely baked into his economic policies. On his campaign website, he focuses on investing in technologies that will mitigate climate change, including building 3 investment funds totaling $550 billion to support local and international effort. Additionally, he published an outline of his proposed economic policy, which includes worker retraining programs for people who lose their jobs to automation, creating jobs in clean energy and infrastructure, deploying high-speed broadband internet to underserved communities, and more oversight of tech companies to identify anti-competitive behavior. He's also spoken to regulating tech companies themselves, including a proposed privacy bill that would prohibit companies from exploiting user data, investment in antitrust enforcement, and the development of tools to limit targeted harassment and hate speech online. In terms of AI, Buttigieg has criticized the Trump administration for starting a trade war with China, instead believing that the US should focus on remaining competitive in the US-China AI arms race. If you'd like to learn more about that, I just did a video on it, and so I'll include the link up here somewhere. He also spoke to concerns surrounding facial recognition when interviewed by Vox, saying that these systems have the potential to be useful for safety measures, but also infringe on personal privacy. He proposed the creation of an interagency council between the Department of Justice and the Department of Commerce to create both regulations and funding opportunities for these technologies. Fifth is Tulsi Gabbard. A House representative from Hawaii, Gabbard is currently polling at just under 2% nationally. Gabbard has a history of supporting policies such as net neutrality, as well as several policies that would give users more control over their data. She is a strong supporter of policies that protect civil liberties, as well as those that protect private citizens against surveillance by both the government and private actors. Gabbard also supports breaking up major tech companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. She also supports increased election security measures, going so far as to introduce an act called the Securing America's Election Act of 2019 that requires every state to either use paper ballots or have a voter-verified paper backup. Gabbard voiced her concerns about AI systems on Joe Rogan's podcast in mid-2019, noting that there is little understanding about how AI works in government and citing concerns around international power imbalances. She advocated for international conversation on this topic, but did not delve into specifics. Sixth is Amy Klobuchar. Currently serving as Senator of Minnesota, Klobuchar is polling at about 4% nationally. Klobuchar has many of the same stances as the other candidates when it comes to national broadband and green infrastructure. She wants to connect every household to high-speed internet by 2022 and plans to invest in the development of green infrastructure and clean energy. In terms of tech companies, she appreciates that they contribute to the economy and provide jobs, but believes that there should be more thorough antitrust investigations into their acquisitions and mergers. She also thinks that they should be held more accountable for the content that they host, potentially through a Section 230 reform. Additionally, she supports the creation of laws that address concerns around privacy and data protection. Klobuchar doesn't seem to have a stance on AI systems specifically. She tweeted about it once, but that was all I could find. Seventh is Deval Patrick. The former governor of Massachusetts, Patrick is currently polling at less than 1% nationally. Patrick's policy stances are a bit sparse compared to the other candidates. I'm not sure if that's because the media isn't covering it or because he truly doesn't have that many policy stances, and from my research I tend to think that it's the latter. He agrees with many of the other candidates on stances such as national broadband and supporting green infrastructure, but doesn't delve into the specifics of how we would accomplish those, nor does he specify where the funding for these programs would come from. For comparison, most of the other candidates offer plans to increase taxes in some way in order to cover this. As governor of Massachusetts, he drastically increased funding for technology research, especially in biotechnology and information technology, so I think it would be reasonable to assume that that would continue into his presidency. Eighth is Bernie Sanders. An independent senator from Vermont, Sanders is currently polling at 22%. Sanders has pledged $150 billion from the Green New Deal towards high-speed broadband internet access for rural communities. He also pledged to eliminate data caps and throttling, and wants to break up large internet service providers such as Comcast. Sanders believes that tech companies should be held liable for the content that their users post on the platform, but has not discussed specific changes to Section 230 or other legislation that might accomplish that. He also plans to break up big tech companies, focusing on Amazon and Facebook. In his initial campaign announcement video, Sanders brought up artificial intelligence, saying that it needs to serve the needs of workers instead of corporate America. And when asked by Vox, Sanders stated that facial recognition systems are currently under-regulated and intrude on the privacy of Americans, as well as that they are dangerous. In fact, Sanders' criminal justice reform plan includes a ban on facial recognition systems for policing, including by immigration enforcement and at the border. Ninth is Tom Steyer. A former hedge fund manager, philanthropist, and environmentalist, Steyer is currently polling at less than 2% nationally. Steyer has pledged to create funding sources for national broadband as part of his partnership with rural communities, as well as to ban facial recognition systems for policing as part of his criminal justice reform. In terms of breaking up large tech companies, Steyer stated that he supports it, but doesn't think that it should be a big part of the Democratic primary or the general election. 10th is Elizabeth Warren. Currently a senator of Massachusetts, Warren is polling at 14.4% nationally. The biggest tech policy stance that Warren is likely known for is her commitment to breaking up big tech companies such as Amazon, Facebook, and Google. She wants to do this in order to increase economic competition. She also plans to expand the use of body cameras in order to increase accountability in policing, while creating privacy laws that protect individual data and civil liberties. When asked her opinion on facial recognition, Warren stated that she would create a task force on digital privacy and public safety in order to establish appropriate guidelines and regulations for these systems. As a senator in 2019, Warren called on federal agencies to address concerns of algorithmic bias affecting people of color in financial services, especially as it pertained to lending discrimination. In terms of tech infrastructure, Warren's plans largely focus on developing green infrastructure. Specifically, she built on former candidate Jay Inslee's 10-year action plan to get to 100% clean energy. She has also pledged to offer a public option for internet access through the new agency that she would create, the Office of Broadband Access. Recipients of grants from this agency would be obligated to provide internet for every household in the area that they serve, and large ISPs such as Comcast would not be eligible for these grants. Last but not least, we have Andrew Yang. An entrepreneur, lawyer, and philanthropist, Yang is currently polling at 3.6% nationally. Yang also has more proposed technology policy than all of the other candidates combined. In light of that, I'm going to summarize as many of them as I can because there's enough stuff here to make a whole standalone video on it. Yang has proposed policies that would make personal data into personal property, limiting how companies can use it without permission or payment, has proposed frameworks for regulating cryptocurrencies and other digital assets, and has proposed several taxes on profits of automation and AI systems, such as for self-driving trucks. He has also proposed retraining programs for workers who lose their jobs to AI and automation. In terms of election security, Yang is interested in introducing more technology into elections in order to make them more accessible, but also wants systems that create an auditable paper trail. Yang supports net neutrality, plans to federally regulate online poker, and wants to introduce more oversight into algorithmic trading to identify fraud more easily. He also wants to increase funding towards medical technology research and development. Finally, Yang plans to create a federal Department of Technology with an associated cabinet-level secretary. The department would work with industry and Congress to assess, support, and regulate new technologies, starting with artificial intelligence, as well as to identify potential technological threats. When asked specifically about facial recognition systems, Yang referred back to his Department of Technology as a way to monitor and regulate them. So, in summary, there are a lot of candidates. Most of them have stances on technology policy, but they're definitely not as strong as their stances on things like the economy, healthcare, and climate change. Personally, I think that makes sense. As much as I would love an increased focus on issues of technology policy, I do recognize that for the average American, things like knowing whether you're going to have a job or whether it's going to be lost to automation, knowing whether or not you're going to have healthcare, and knowing whether or not the planet is going to burn in your lifetime are probably at the forefront of their minds when they're voting. But I hope you found this video helpful. It's going up on the same day as the next Democratic debate on February 7th, so hopefully this gives you a quick crash course in the candidates' positions on tech policy before that debate starts. If you did find this video useful, you can let me know by giving it a like. You can also subscribe to my channel if you want to stay up to date with AI systems and how we interact with them on a day-to-day basis. If you'd like to support me even more, you can become a patron on Patreon. And otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to get a glimpse into the antics of my PhD life. Bye.